made a very interesting point about empathy in buildings and how to quantify that empathy.
Internet of Things makes our cars driverless, our homes connected, our cities smart, and factories run seamlessly. Artificial intelligence combined with IoT data is where the business value is created.
Imagine yourself in the driverless world. I will teach you to pivot your career and innovate in your business using IoT, AI, and autonomous vehicles. Let's begin your journey with me today. So when I heard about buildings being connected, and in my world, I heard it about smart buildings, and I was thinking about how to make the building more efficient from an energy perspective, from a remote management of controls for a facilities manager who might be on vacation, that kind of thing. And so Comfy does that, right? Comfy helps manage the environment to make it comfortable for everybody, and it adds that social element in there, which is kind of even another step of interesting. But when you talk about empathy and measuring empathy, how do you envision empathy as a business function?
Well, I think I did a SoundCloud thing with Lawrence from Digital Mindfulness, and we talk about something that I kind of created, which is called building emotion. And of course, it's either a noun or a verb. It's in these buildings we have to build emotion. We have to somehow try to quantify and reach out and connect with the people. And more important in these buildings is becoming the people. In the early days, we dealt with energy. We shut stuff off and we worked through the weekends. I think we were doing a reasonably good job of that, certainly in the major complexes. But what we were not necessarily doing a good job of is satisfying the people. And as we more and more started getting involved with the IoT folks and their campuses, and we saw the radical things they were doing in their campuses that were different than we were doing in our buildings, because they were driven by the people. And we have what we call the 330 and 300 rule, which is probably needs bigger numbers, but it basically $3 is energy, 30 is the maintenance cost, and 300 is the cost of the $300 per square foot is the cost of the people. So the people are the most important thing. So I think we've just in the last little while come to that realization. There's another thing too, that the whole new free thinking and the work away, the work remote, the office building turning into a hotel, all of these functions are radically changing our building and what's expected of us. And so the building has to have its own emotion, and we have to be able to read that emotion, and we have to be able to react to it. So when somebody comes in with a cell phone, we recognize them and we set parameters to there. Now we're starting to get close to smart. Still not sure we're all that smart. We're just actually reacting. And I think we're going to be in that reaction business and what I call automated intelligence for a while, rather than artificial intelligence, because the artificial intelligence, to me, one of the definitions is artificial intelligence is stuff that's never been done yet. But as soon as it's done, and then we understand it, we will then turn it into an automated intelligence process, and we will self-learn from it. And in that whole exercise, I think we have a great opportunity to prepare ourselves for artificial intelligence. I think that's an awful acronym, artificial intelligence. It's artificial is such a negative word, and intelligence is such a positive word. And I'm not sure how it came about, but
Rob might be able to tell us where it started or the origin, any new word, in the IoT world or automation world. He just immediately has a whole history to that. So I know the world of AI has been around for a long, long
Long
time.
time. Yeah.
And I believe the artificial is that it's not human intelligence. It's created by the human. So that's
Hmm.
the artificial.
But artificial as a word is not a, if I told you you were artificial, you might be offended.
It's true. I have thick skin.
rather
I
than
don't get
rather than
offended so
compliment
easily,
it.
but yes, somebody else might be.
Yeah. You are a master. You are a master of artificial. I don't think I
Thank
want to
you.
be labeled as that. Anyway, we
So
digress.
coming back to the whole emotions of building, I'm kind of stuck on that one point because I think you can automate the machinery, and you can take the control systems and make them more intelligent and save energy and do things, right? I mean, I wrote about AI in buildings and said how machine learning is being used to find out the energy utilization for of EVs charging, electric vehicles charging in the
Hmm.
building, or the energy utilization of different equipments and things like that, which is all just equipments and data, but there's no human element to that. So that's
Hmm.
why I like going back to the emotion aspect of it. When you were saying the emotion of the building,
Hmm.
first it was like the building has emotion and it was like a abstract thing. And then once you started talking about the person comes in with their cell phone and you set parameters or you give them the kind of customized environment, I'm just thinking, when we think of buildings, inherently a building with nobody in it has no value. Like if the building is not rented out or leased or
Or no emotion.
there's no
It's
human in there,
emotionless. It's
it's
emotionless because
emotionless.
it's empty.
I mean,
Okay.
that,
Now
yeah,
you fill it. You fill it with emotion. You fill it with the emotion of the people who come into the building, and
that's right.
but we've not done a good job of actually following that emotion. And I think the software folks have, the IT industry has taught us that. The other thing that is happening is we're harder and harder every day it is to attract the young people to come to work in these buildings. And so the buildings have to be appealing to them. And so that whole setting an emotion and basically and having an interaction, having deviceless relationships where they walk in and it actually does something, they don't have to pull a phone out of their pocket. uh, we're starting to uh, work on that. There was a lot of insight. I went over to Helsinki and spoke at the Nordic Smart Building conference, and they I came back with a real head shake because North Americans kind of look more at the energy, the grid, all of those things that you're talking about, and I think in a lot of ways we've done not that bad of a job of it. I think it's further evolved than you'd be actually surprised to know the things that we're actually doing in the average building or the average university campus. In fact, just talking to your the fellow from Stanford the other day, he's going to go speaking at a seminar that I'm involved with in Detroit. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of alternate energy pieces, and it's all the engineering stuff. I think we do a reasonably good job of that. The one that I think we're struggling with is to try and how to catch a hold of how do we take this building emotion as uh, a fabric. Really, what it is, it's like a virtual fabric
Yeah,
that comes over the building, and it comes. I think the easiest way to imagine it is if it's a hotel is got to have a fancy lobby. It's got to grab you right when you come in. It has to appeal to your emotions. Office buildings, not so much so, but at least a little bit. And what we need to do is our buildings are now becoming very multi-user, used for many uses. And so being able to change a meeting room into looking more like a Starbucks is something desirable now. And to have those kinds of conditions, to have uh, the Wi-Fi systems inside so people can come in seamlessly, start working in this area and interact is a whole new idea. to the cubicle idea
Yeah.
of office spaces.
So one of the things,
Workspaces changing.
one of the things we have in tech companies here in Silicon Valley is it's spread out, and they want people, and they have this open work environment, so it's not divided cubicles.
That's correct.
And even when they host like dev camps or hackathons in the weekend, they have all these beanie bags, and so that's kind of the normal environment in the Googles and the campus around here. So I find it very fascinating. Whenever I visit any of these campus, I actually find the kind of chairs that they have, and variety of different chairs and variety of beanie bags, and they set up so that if somebody wants quiet time and they just want to sit there and work and not talk to people, or they want to socialize, then there's groups, and the way it's set up so that people have free will on how they want to engage in their environment, to be productive, to belong.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes back to your point of setting up the environment for this multi-user environment, understanding the emotion of the building.
But again, I think we can take a lead from the work that the autonomous car and even beyond the autonomous car, just ordinary cars. I mean, what kind of car now doesn't have a seat heater? And if I'm cold, why can't I just push a button and turn on the heat and turn it off when I want to turn it off? And we're sort of seeing that kind of thinking starting to evolve into the new buildings, and basically that kind of an interaction. So there's a bit of a struggle going on between total automated buildings and people in control. So it's this whole perception: are we happy? And there's everybody comes out with the smartest building in the world, and sometimes the smartest building in the world looks really dumb, and the people hate it. And if the people hate it, then it's not success. So I think the whole building emotion piece is, we have to understand what the building is. And I loved your description of an empty building, because that's got to be the loneliest thing. Ironically enough, we live in an environment where developers build empty buildings, having no idea what they're going to use them for. And so no wonder they have no soul. No wonder they have no emotion. So the building.
I'm of the vision that when we get to this connected world of the future, what I call as the driverless world, what we call as office is going to shift, and we might be working in our cars.
That's right.
It's not
I love that scenario, the autonomous car, and you're sitting there and it's basically a business pod or an office pod.
It's not just I'm driving and the car, I'm not driving. It's not just that I'm sitting and working while the car is driving me. I'm actually engaging with people and meeting while the car is driving us around, and then picking somebody else and dropping them off, and it manages the logistics. And if the person is getting dropped off, maybe they can just continue the conversation remotely. And so the whole concept of the office, what I call as a pod, changes, right? I want to live to see that one day. I hope I will be able to drive.
But when you leave your pod, when you leave your autonomous pod and you have to go to your home or you have to go to a building, why shouldn't as much of that communication wise come with you?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to do, is trying to move people. The other thing that's been pointed out is we're getting into this situation where all people are not of the same value in these companies. If you happen to be the top dog at a software company, anything you want, anywhere you want it, is what we will give you. And maybe it even becomes like a job perk, is that you start to get different kind of emotional, you get to ride in the pod car if you develop certain pieces of software or something like that.
I used to work in mobile analytics at eBay, and it was early stages of when everything was shifting towards mobile, and people were trying to figure out what is mobility. And I had a pet project, which is an app that I wanted to build. And I wanted to do that on mobile and integrate with Facebook. And went and met with the Facebook team. And there was one guy who actually worked on the Facebook mobile app, in the entire company. This was like maybe 2009, I want to say.
Mhm.
And they said, oh, our mobile guy is not here. And it turned out that because he was the only engineer who worked on mobile,
Mhm.
they said he got his way and he did not come to the office every day. He came when he felt like. He worked remotely and he had access to check in things and do things. That's the world you're talking about, that everybody could get, or
Mhm.
like based on value of the person, maybe they get more mobility than somebody else who has less value.
Right.
That's
Yeah, well,
some.
it's a whole like I grew up in a time like when I started with actually the control company that I started with. One of their sort of holding things was is they gave you a company car, and that was like, wow, I got a company car kind of thing. And as a young person, because you had probably a better car than you could afford because you leased it, and and they took it out of your pay, but that was sort of the carrot. And what they're saying now is the people coming in these buildings, you can't give them a car because it's what would I do with it? I can't park it. I can't park it near San Francisco. So I don't want a car. What do I want? I want flexibility, remoteness. I want an unlimited Uber account or Lyft account, and their values are changing, and so as we're trying to design these, so we've got these developers building these empty buildings with no soul, and we've got these kids lining up full of emotion and enthusiasm, and somehow we have to kind of push that together. And how a guy like me who's in the building automation business gets involved in that equation is completely beyond me.
I heard about this book. It's in my list to read. A book called Workism, which is about where are these companies which employs hundreds and thousands of people, and people go into work and spend a lot of time on work. So the come and they look for their spiritual growth in terms of community, what is their identity, what is their purpose in life from their work. And that was the whole concept of this workism. So it's not workaholism, it's workism.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you start building office buildings, automating office buildings for this workism,
Mm-hmm.
then you need to go back to what's the identity of the person and how does that shift when they are in the building, outside the building, and if they define mobility. Is it tied to the building? Is it good if it's tied to the building, or should they detach it from the building? And then how does the building value chain benefit from?
Yes, I have a view. Basically, we've always kind of looked at disruption as a bad thing, but the biggest thing with disruption is it hits us right on the head, and it basically makes us think completely differently about how we're going to do this situation. And that is a good thing, because sometimes we've been doing something, we had a broken system 100 years ago, we sort of fixed it, and then we sort of fixed it again, and we sort of fixed it, and here we are 100 years later with a sort of fixed system. And disruption comes up and says, why are you doing this? It doesn't make any sense in the world. The whole Uber movement is just that kind of a thing. Is we have this taxi system that never really worked very well, and basically bringing in a whole new bunch of new technologies just made it incredibly convenient, made the people feel like they were in control. They are in control. It introduces the people. There's just so many dynamics going on there, that is the Uberization of almost everything is something we have to do, and that's disruption. And it means that whatever we're doing, we have to think about doing it differently.
So I teach autonomous vehicle business and business of self-driving cars course, and then how to build a successful business with Internet of Things at Stanford Continuing Studies. And I also have this new site, Driverless World School, where I'm launching online classes on business models and data related to autonomous vehicles and IoT. So I make an important distinction in my class between innovation and disruption. So you can innovate in technology and come up with a better way of controlling equipments. You can actually say, hey, I make sensors which are much more tinier and they're more cost effective. You can come up with all kinds of innovations, but it becomes a disruption when it impacts a value chain. It impacts customers' life and they start paying for it, or they start adopting it, or they start demanding, saying, don't do it this way, I want it changed, but thank you for bringing this to me. So
Mhm.
I as an outsider, I'm looking at automated buildings and smart buildings, and it feels like you're at that cusp where the building industry is beginning to face the disruption. Now how they embrace is going to decide what happens in the next phase of that particular business and the whole ecosystem.
Hmm. Very much so. And that's why I'm really pleased that your autonomous cars ran into our
They're
our
not.
buildings, because that's a good thing, because there's a lot of what you're dealing with there. And the Uber thing, of course, quickly evolves to the autonomous car. And once you're in an Uber car, I've called it with my phone. It was really nice to meet Richard, but did I really have to meet Richard? Or Richard could have been could be a voice that just spoke to me and said that I'm Richard, your autonomous car, and I get in the back and away I go,
Oh,
kind of thing. So uh,
you were talking about Richard. Oh my God, you were talking about the autonomous vehicle named Richard.
yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean that's the next step. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to make that leap. And so what you're doing there, I think, is very important to the automated building industry, because that's the stage we're at. Is uh, we've built cars, we've put the chillers and fans in there, and we've controlled them, and we can make the window shades go up and down, and we can pretty much do anything you want in the building. But I think what the autonomous piece starts to do is it starts to ask the question, why are you doing these things? And how do I interact with people while I do them? And I think that's a bigger problem we're trying to get our heads around is we can do anything, but it's for the masses. If we make one person happy, we maybe make 10 unhappy. And so we have to individualize, and we have to allow them to have input into these equations. And that, I think that's some of the stuff you're dealing with in the driverless car thing. So I find that intriguing too. So I think it's good that we're talking. Uh, I'm I'm here to learn. You
Thank you.
guys have got bigger budgets and more press and than automated buildings. But automated buildings, uh, in their attempt to become smart, I think they can learn a lot from autonomous vehicles and some of the stuff that you're delving into.
I want to make sure that we cover the world because IoT is in every country, in every possible industry. So, have you seen interesting companies or interesting personalities working in IoT come from Canada? Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, we're seeing uh, another thing for our industry is we're starting to, like, I grew up in the microprocessor industry, direct digital control, and now we're starting to see the Raspberry Pis and the Beagle boards. We're starting to see that powerful technology getting troweled on, and we're seeing uh, what we call edge controllers, where in fact the device becomes smart. And probably something, an example just for the people, something like a Ring doorbell that basically it pre-records somebody coming up, and then once you push the button, it actually captures the pre-recorded video and then connects it to your cell phone, and just a bunch of technologies going along. Like how did a doorbell become so complicated, but how much more useful this new doorbell is than the old doorbell. Anyway, we're starting to see more and more products like that. And Leo, who's out of George Brown College in Toronto, they run a DDC course and basically an automation, and they actually set each student up with little Raspberry orientated controls done by Contemporary Controls, and they upload operating systems, and now you can even upload artificial intelligence and self-learning algorithms, and all of that is starting to come. So it's starting to get pushed out to a device level, and these devices will start to take over. The control of the door is the most obvious one, that we can look at you and see your face and your eye and say that you're okay to come in. And if we don't recognize you, we can say we're going to put you through to this station, and you talk to these people and see if they want to let you in, and so we go on from there. So it's that whole interface. We self-learn. We learn that this person shows up at 10 o'clock every day, and so we're probably okay to let them in. And all of that is starting to become, as we start to move towards our version of the autonomous building.